Hi, everyone, and welcome to the video on your pilot study map and your problem statement and research purpose. That's what we're going to be going over. So the first thing I'm going to talk through is the pilot study map, and I'm going to talk through it using an example that's all color-coded. So here's the example. It will be available in our Google folder. And the reason why I color coded it is because I want to showcase how everything in the pilot study map needs to be in alignment with the research question. All right. And all of this in your pilot study map graphic organizer, of course, is mostly blank, but I have left some of these subheadings if you want to organize it this way. All right. So I'll talk about each of these pieces. This, by the way, is a study that I have now published. And doing the pilot study map years ago was really useful to help me figure out my argument. I had a very complex problem I was trying to address, as you can see. And doing this map, I actually did several drafts of the map, rearranging it in different ways to try to understand what is my targeted audience and what is my targeted argument. And in fact, this paper is available, the published version now is available in the folder, and you can even see how the argument in the paper has even changed a little bit from the map as it's laid out here. So that the final, even in writing it, I realized there was a little bit that needed to be changed. So the research question is, in an urban district, what organizational resources are pivotal for establishing opportunities for science-specific professional learning? All right. Now, what I've done is I have color-coded different pieces of the research question so we can see how they are embedded throughout every single piece of the map. And this is really important because now that you have a fabulous research question, you can essentially take everything you've done in your Qual 1 and tighten it up to lead your reader directly to your research question. And that's a lot of what we're going to be doing this semester. So moving up to the pilot study, although maybe we've changed the words a little bit, but essentially they're in alignment. So what we see here, what this set of things here is called a funnel argument. Now, your problem statement, your problem of practice may not be a funnel argument, and that's okay. You don't have to rewrite it to be a funnel argument, but a funnel argument is a really, it's kind of like an easy shorthand for trying to get your reader from the big picture and what really matters down into your specific problem. So you can see here that in the very first statement, I don't refer to everything in my research question, right? I'm getting the reader there piece by piece. So in the first one, I'm just talking about science education and teachers. The teachers are asked to examine and shift their practices to teach science in certain ways, right? And I make an argument for equity. Agentive learning opportunities should be made especially available to marginalized children. Then I want to introduce another piece of my research question, right? So I'm not going to stay just talking about how science should be taught. That will mislead my reader. So I move into the next thing, opportunities for professional learning. Here you can see the color-coded green are a key avenue by which teachers will learn and shift their instruction. Now, this is a normative practice. Notice that when I say teachers will learn and shift their instruction, that is a reflection of something in the sentence above. In the sentence above, it says teachers are asked to examine and shift their practices. Now, I didn't use the exact same words, but this is a, again, illuminating some of the practices of academic writing is that in the next sentence or in the next paragraph, you take a piece of the sentence before, and then you move the reader a little bit forward. Then you take a piece and you move the reader a little bit forward and so forth. All right. Now, each of these sentences, by the way, in my problem of practice statement might be a whole paragraph, or they might be several sentences, right? So each of these top two might be 2 or 3 sentences with citations. And each of these bottom, where we get really specific, might be a whole paragraph, or maybe the two together might be developed into a whole paragraph, right? Because your problem statement is usually 2 or 3 paragraphs long. So this, I'm condensing the argument so that I can understand the argument I'm trying to make. And then I will apply it to the problem statement I already have. So you already have written this up. I will apply that argument to make sure that that is the argument I'm making. Right. So again, I'm just going to say it again, that you have something already written, but maybe it doesn't get your reader honing into the research question. So you write out your argument. That's what this is. This is an argument about the problem of practice. You write it out using the map, and then you go back and you look at those 2 or 3 paragraphs and you say, okay, how does this need to be rearranged so that I make that very precise argument? Okay, now notice that in this next piece, I now add another piece of my research question, and I reflect what's in the sentence above. So, however, districts serving our most marginalized children, again, the equity argument, may not have the funds or capacity to support professional learning in science education. So I'm tying in 2 concepts from the sentences above. And finally, of course, I cannot finish up my problem of practice statement without arriving at every single thing in my research question. And this is super important, especially because you may have written your problem of practice statement for your qualifying exam 1, and now your transition, now you have a research question for your qual 2, so you need to move it to where you have arrived at everything in your research question. This is probably the most important thing you can do to make sure your introduction passes muster for your qual 2. All right. So you can see, despite the key role districts play in developing and allocating resources. And in fact, I didn't turn this red, but I hint at it up here, right? With the funds or capacity. So despite the key role districts play in developing and allocating resources to support professional learning. So now I'm bringing all 3 ideas together. They often struggle to provide the necessary structures, especially in science education. So this is the heart of the problem of practice. Now, notice I didn't say anything about research, and it's okay if you do say a little bit about research here, but that I'm laying out that there's districts themselves have this particular problem, right? They need to allocate resources to support professional learning, and they struggle to do so in science education. All right. Now, I am moving into the research purpose and significance. And again, you could talk a little bit about research and the problem of practice. And obviously, you're going to be citing other people's studies. But now I'm going to be talking about my study and where it lies in the whole grand scheme of the literature. All right. So I start out by saying, in a very specific way, there is a need to understand and identify how sets of resources, sorry, I'm going to turn it red, operate together to support professional learning. All right. So this is a strong statement, right? This is saying that this is, identifying a gap in research, right? So we need research to understand and identify how these sets of resources operate together. Now, it could be a need. This statement right here could be a need. Sometimes people say we need to understand something better. Sometimes people say we need to research something more. Sometimes people say we need new theories. Like we need to bring a Black feminist theory to understand this. Or maybe we need new contexts. Maybe we need to understand this in the context of urban California, or in the context of charter schools, for example. So there could be all kinds of ways in which your research fills a particular gap. It doesn't necessarily have to be that there's just a gap in the research, right? Maybe, or in the literature, maybe there's these specific needs, theory, context, maybe we need to do a different methods like action research. Okay. Now, part of the research purpose and significance is I have to refer back to the practical need and the problem of practice. I am making the argument that identifying these resources will allow districts to make decisions regarding scarce resources to support teacher professional learning in science. So I'm saying, hey, if I do this research, I can help address this problem that districts have, this problem of practice. Okay, and then I talk a little bit about how I'm going to do that, right? I address this need through the presentation of a qualitative case study of science education reform in a particular kind of district. And if you remember about the research questions, right, being specific in a very particular kind of district, and here's the particular reform goal, focus on moving instruction towards student-centered equity-based approach. All right. Now, each of these things is going to then be expanded into, or I mean, of course, the problem of practice you already have, so you might do some rearranging and maybe some adding. And the research purpose and significance, I would say each of these things here is going to end up being a paragraph or so, right? And with citations. So this is almost like an outline. I'm honing down my argument. I'm trying to make sure the argument is really precise. And in doing so, believe me, you may end up rewriting these sentences several times, right? Like I've done. So like as you try to write these, you might be like, oh, wait a minute, what am I trying to do again? Right? It helps you to hone that argument down because you are now making an argument, right? Like you have this agency and power right now to make a particular kind of argument. This argument up here is based on existing literature. And this argument here is about why you are studying what you are studying. All right. Now, moving into the lit review headings, same thing. You can understand the headings, the buckets of your lit review based on your research question. You need to make sure you cover every piece. So in this case, and by the way, again, I revised this multiple times from my paper. I had things in different order. I had too much in one area. I had to reduce and so forth. So doing this map really helped me. But that I need to actually lay out why it's important that science educators have professional learning opportunities, and then say, especially for science educators that serve students who are historically marginalized, right? So I need to make this argument in my lit review. It's really important that we have this. It's not happening, and it's particularly important for these teachers, all right? Then I need to move into the heart of my research question and talk about the resources for science-specific professional learning. What do we know about those, right? And so in that section, I'm going to talk about the typical district use of resources, and I'm going to talk about empirical research on elements of capacity or resources that support professional learning opportunities in districts. Notice I don't necessarily say science education because it's possible that there's not actually enough studies on resources that support professional learning opportunities in science education. Like that almost might be too narrow. So I'm going to widen it out a little bit and talk about resources that support professional learning opportunities, period. It depends a lot on your body of literature. Some areas there's a lot, so you can be totally narrow. Other areas you need to expand just a bit and then essentially tell your reader, well, I'm going to start here because we don't really know everything about what's going on for science ed. And then I'm going to do this study so that we have more literature on that. Now, I also summarize my theoretical framework because this is important. One thing I didn't do here that I think maybe would be useful is writing down why this theoretical framework should be used to understand this thing, because you will need to make that argument in your paper. And then finally, I talk a little bit about the research methods. This is going to be a case study, and then the numbers and types of data, right? Now, for your pilot study, of course, this is going to be really small. It might be 2 interviews with teacher leaders, right? And that's totally fine. So you might say 2 interviews of teachers or of principals who have such and such experiences selected in these ways, all right, in your research methods. Okay, We will talk more, particularly about the literature review headings in a later date. Now, I want to turn to something slightly different. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And again, these slides are available. These are some examples from prior students. This is their problem. So this is Katie Duffy Scher's problem of practice. She started out with a broad issue. Well, one of the most important factors of IDEA is to ensure family participation in the special education process. Evidence indicates that essential required elements in the process are not only not family friendly, it could be argued that they are family opposed, right? So remember, she doesn't, so one of the things to think of is she doesn't start out like, the education system is flawed and, not socially just. That's like too big. She starts on at least one piece of her research question. Now, then she gets more specific. To be a dynamic participant in the special education process, a family must understand their rights, the special education process, and feel comfortable. So she's kind of giving a little more detail about that. Then she says, without intentional inclusion in all aspects of the process, we lose engaged and informed family participation. So now she's saying, okay, in some ways she's moved from the problem to the consequence of the problem with these last two. With the very last one, without family voice and active participation, special education programs could not guarantee that they have determined the most appropriate placement accommodations or goals. So she has a funnel argument for the first two, and then she moves into a consequences kind of a piece. So here's the problem, here's the consequences. Now, this is an example of the research purpose and significance from Ari. So here he says, the literature primarily focuses on technology itself, barriers to implementation, and uses of technology that mimic analog assignments. There is a need for studying pedagogy and technology together. So that's his nugget of justifying his study. What do we need to understand? What do we need to research? What do we need to study? And then he has another sentence there. Then he connects it to the practical need. Identifying these practices will better support culturally diverse youth to access and transform literacy goals, right? So he connects it back up to his problem of practice. And then he says how he's going to address it through research. Okay, so the pilot study map essentially is going to be used to revise and write, in some cases, pieces of the introduction and the whole paper. So it serves as this really great tool to kind of do both pieces, expand on and understand what is this argument we're making across both of these things. And again, this may seem unfamiliar to you, but I know all of you are writers, right? All of you know about different genres. You all have you all like understand this idea of knowing your audience, of having a purpose and that stuff. And now, again, you are moving into the ranks of researchers where you are going to be making an argument. And this is how you lay it out. All right, so I am going to talk a little bit more now about the actual problem of practice and research purpose and significance through an example. And this is once again color-coded. This is from my dissertation student, Heather Ferguson. She did a mixed method study, and her study is available to all of you. So hers is a complicated question, all right? I'm gonna start here at the end. She says the setting, it's a charter school setting. So everything here needs to be couched in charter school setting. She asks, how does site administrators and high school special education teachers, so this is the who, work collectively, so this is the what, to influence learning, that's green, for another who, students with disabilities in a charter school setting. All right, so she's got teachers and high school administrators working together to do something, and the something is influencing learning for students with disabilities in a charter school setting. She has to arrive at every single one of these elements by the end of her problem of practice. So watch how she does it. So she starts with charter schools. Charter schools were created to provide families better educational options, for their children, right? So she's like, all right, well, there were some positives, I guess, but they struggle to serve students with disabilities. So that's that orange, right? So she gets boom, boom, charter schools and her focal students. And notice there's a citation here. Really important to have citations in your problem of practice. Then she introduces the next piece. Charter schools struggle to provide appropriate academic programs and support systems for students with learning disabilities so that they can be academically successful. Another citation. So now, do you notice that she's layering? She started with charter schools, students with disabilities, now charter schools supporting them. Then she gets a bit into the consequences. As a result, students with disabilities are estranged in an educational setting that was established to improve the quality of learning for all students. And then she has another sentence that's a consequence. So her final argument is more big picture over to consequences. All right. Now here is students continue to fail in an academic setting that was established to combat the status quo of unsatisfactory results. So that's another charter school sentence. All right. Now, she has to arrive at this idea of teachers and administrators working collectively. So here she goes. One way that charter schools might shift their practice around special education is to focus on the relationship between teachers and administrators. So she has to convince us that this is important. And this is what she does. The key stakeholders hold a great deal of capacity in different areas, yet they do not often work collaboratively to drive programming. So with a citation, she's saying, hey, this might be a way to leverage and to make this work out better, but it doesn't often happen. And then she talks about those two groups, why each of them is important. School administrators hold a great deal of power. Special education teachers work closely with students. And then again, back to this idea, but they do not work closely together, right? They have issues around their working relationship, and a very nice citation. So ask yourself, by the end of this problem of practice, did Heather arrive at every element of the research question? Like, did she describe the problem going on in this setting for every element? And I think the answer is yes. She could have done a better job, I'm sure, here or there, but so now she moves into the research purpose and significance. As the charter school network is expanding, so again, targeting charter schools, it is imperative to better understand why there is a lack of opportunity that exists in these institutions for students with disabilities. Sorry, I did not get a great color for this. Students with disabilities, of course. Okay, so notice here she says to better understand why. That's key language in a research purpose and significance, because the research purpose is always to understand something or to study something or to research something, right? It's ultimately to change something, but before we change it, we have to understand it, right? So again, she gets into teacher administrator relationships. So now she's targeted two other pieces of her research question. She's saying literature states that these relationships are vital to improving the quality of learning. Aha, now she's gotten every single piece of her research question in these first couple of sentences. But she elaborates a little bit, right? Administrators make important decisions. The sentence was already in her problem of practice, I think. Something to think about is repetition. But she continues her argument. Examining this relationship, right, will provide the opportunity to understand how these two groups work collaboratively to impact the learning conditions for students with disabilities. So she's, boom, like this is the important thing here. Okay, boy, another repetition. Whew, I didn't even catch this when I was reading through this. So watch that a little bit. Sometimes things can get repetitive. Now she gets into a little bit more about how this will affect the practice. Observing this relationship may reveal some key factors in which schools can address to create better systems to support students with disabilities. All right, so she's saying, look, understanding this, observing this may help us address the problem. All right. And then she kind of restates it in a different way. Evaluating the impact that teachers and administrators have on learning conditions could be imperative to improving charter schools and the way they serve their students with special needs. So way to get in every piece of the research question here. Boom, boom, boom. And all of this is conjecture. I mean, it's based on the literature, but she's conjecturing the ways in which her research might help, right? She's hypothesizing and hoping that her research will do these things. And then she, goes on and just continues this argument that they may receive the same equitable access to academic growth and success. Now, I highlighted this word inclusiveness here because she hasn't talked about inclusiveness yet. So this is actually a bit of a problem, that she's been talking about learning environments. She's been talking about student growth, student success, and suddenly she's talking about inclusiveness. So really watch that in yours. If you want to talk about inclusiveness, you need to lay it out from the very beginning, right? Now, finally, she introduces the next piece, which is the background. To support this study, the background covers charter schools and their relationship with special education, as well as the importance of teacher and administrator relationships. So the background actually covers a lot of, again, the same things that are in the research question. Okay, so you can go back to that video and replay it and look at the example and so forth for thinking about your research purpose and significance. I just wanted to also draw your attention to what's written in the actual text of the Qual 2 and pilot study. And I'm not going to read off this slide. I want you to go to your assignment and check out how these things might help and support you with writing those pieces. But importantly, here's how to actually turn it in. So you are going to create a Google Doc in your shared, in the folder I sent you. And you're going to name it your name _ pilot study / Qual 2. All right. So this is your pilot study Qual 2 that you're going to be adding to this whole time. So it's important that it's named in a way that I can find it, is basically what's going on. All right. Then you can put in the headers. Now, the headers are already in your assignment. So they're all the things in bold in your assignment. And you'll take your problem of practice statement from your Qual 1, you'll stick it under your problem of practice statement here, and then you'll revise it. All right, and then of course you'll write your research purpose under the appropriate heading. So the big thing being that, and you can take your statement, your problem of practice statement from your Qual 1, you could revise it somewhere else and then stick it in here. That's fine too. But essentially that problem statement, by the time it hits me, it should be revised based on your pilot study map, right? You should have really thought about it in relationship to your research question. But the great part is it's already drafted. Okay. And then again, here we have the headings, right? So, these might change a little bit as the assignment changes, but basically look at your assignment and the headings will be there. Okay. All right. I hope you have a really good week, and I hope you enjoy this process. It can be like kind of a breath of fresh air to really hone it down, narrow your argument, and get that argument down. It makes something that seems like a complicated mess sometimes turn into something that is like, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. So I wish you the best of luck. Please post a question or a comment. And I will of course answer any questions the next time I see you.